Hello dear friends, we're in Wuyishan. Now is the most active period of harvest and production of cliff oolongs. We're right next to the Zhengyan area, where cliff oolongs originally came from. Some people call tea that grows here half cliff oolong, although some sellers and even manufacturers here still call it cliff oolong with no hesitation. It's not that important. What's important is the price and the quality of the tea. If that's taken care of, then it doesn't matter what it's called. This is a portion of what's been harvested today. Production is in full swing today. They've prepared a batch of Mao Cha, which later has to go through Hongbei. So far it's only gone through primary roasting. It's been withered and dried, but Hongbei has not been done yet. Today this tea will be going through Hongbei. Now we'll take a little walk around the tea fields, the beautiful tea gardens of this factory. Oolongs are often machine-picked. Nowadays tea is very rarely harvested by hand, only if it's of the highest grade. It's a well-known fact. That's why there's lots of stems in the raw material, and it appears to be very mixed. But later it will be manually sorted, and the stems will be picked out. So eventually raw materials become very uniform. This particular variety is called Dangui. Sometimes it's also called 303. 303 is an official agricultural name. Similarly, Jingguanyin is also called 204. A few other varieties are also known by numbers. You can clearly see what the raw material consists of before sorting. The leaves have been machine-picked, so you can see how stems and occasional sticks get into the mix. So after primary processing, there's less raw material left than from any other variety, because after such crude harvesting, a large portion of it will be thrown out. In Wuyishan, you often come across such a view, workers carrying around massive bags of tea. In the cliff area of Zhengyan, you would see beautiful baskets on a carry pole instead, but here they carry tea in bags. This is what tea harvesting in Wuyishan looks like nowadays. I'd say 90% of tea is being produced in this way. Machine picking is very efficient. They're moving as fast as I am. There are 3 workers involved. 2 are holding a bag, and 1 is working with a sort of mower. Harvesting at this plantation is almost over. They're finishing the last row, and that's it. They're done. As of right now, harvesting is finished. Some manufacturers are ashamed of these mowers. They were suggesting to us to film workers manually picking tea. They didn't want it to look like their tea is processed and produced by machines. I think there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the current reality. It's the primary way of tea harvesting these days. Maybe someday they'll come up with a more ecological way. I once saw it in Maizhou. They use smaller mowers that run on electric motors with no gasoline. So at least they don't make such noise in the middle of the mountains. They move and work quietly. As a result of machine harvesting, the raw material here is very rough. But this simplified way of harvesting is later compensated for by a sophisticated and challenging manufacturing process. The final stages, drying and Hongbei, are still done the traditional way. They use natural coal. They use all the necessary tools for tea to acquire real fragrance and aroma. I think I've mentioned it before. I don't appreciate glossy promotional images that tea manufacturers like to use in their advertisements or commercials, where workers in slow motion make yao xing by hand. There was a time when we also made a commercial like that, but we didn't fake it. We filmed real manual production, but they rarely ever do that anymore. And such tea is very expensive. It's not mass-produced, to say the least. It's okay when a company that produces exclusive tea makes commercials like that, but it's very unfortunate when it's done by companies that make mass-market product. They dress girls in traditional outfits, bring them to a plantation, and not a real one, but to a wild garden with tea bushes growing somewhere on the cliffs. They pick the flushes by hand and carry them in beautiful bamboo baskets fresh from a store. Then they walk into an equally gorgeous factory, very neat, almost sterile, where they spread the tea to dry so carefully that God forbid a leaf should fall on the ground. Then they toss trays with tea, again by hand, manually roast it, no machines in sight, and they wither and crush the leaves manually as well, no sign of a machine anywhere. I hate it. It's so fake, nothing but a theatrical performance. But there's another extreme. People say they all use tons of pesticides in China. Everything is fake in China. They're all trying to fool you. In my opinion, these rumours only exist because of those obviously fake commercials, which are so clearly far from reality that it distorts the actual truth. We don't do that. We show everything as it is. We show how it's being done. But there's no need to be appalled by it. Good harvest, quality production, adequate pricing. That's what a tea lover should care about. Of course, there are other things to be wondering about, like the subtle aspects of the tea ceremony, or various ways to brew tea. But don't be enchanted by what's not there. If you drop all unrealistic expectations, then you won't eventually be disappointed. Now we're going to do an interview with Yaroslav, who hasn't been to Wuyishan in around 6 years, I think. Is that right, Yaroslav? Almost 6 years? Wuyishan is an awful place. Our Yaroslav is suddenly sad, hiding here in the bushes. What's wrong? Could you tell us what's wrong with Wuyishan? It's too hot. It's hotter here than in Africa. In fact, it's just the beginning of May. Not even May yet, it's April 30th today. And it's already almost 30 degrees. And in summer it's so hot, you don't want to know about it. In summer it's better to stay at home with AC and not even dare to go outside. Yaroslav is a little tired today, but it's okay, we'll manage. We're still going to make some tea, right, Yarek? I can collect some tea, only if we find a colder place. We can collect, but only in a colder place. So probably soon we'll head somewhere where it's colder and collect tea there. Would you agree to collect tea in Moscow, Yarek? Tea doesn't grow in Moscow. If it doesn't grow in Moscow, we'll plant some. It's way too hot here, isn't it, Yarek? Yes, it is. I want to go to a forest and build a hut there and maybe something else. Okay, we're going to some forest to build a hut there and maybe something else. That was Yaroslav reporting from Wuyishan. It's very hot here, so we're going to go have some tea, because this heat is really a bit hard to bear. We're at a factory that manufactures red tea. Since today is already April 30th, the production of red tea is already finished. It's all finished. The last batch was produced last week. Now we're going to taste 7 different varieties. I can already say that I like this tea very much. In fact, we have tea from 2 different manufacturers. I had a few samples from another manufacturer, but we're tasting everything at once. They're being tolerant about it. Not always, but often they are. We have 3 varieties here. Zhaozhong, that I already prepared here. We call it Zhaozhong B. Then Zhaozhong 511, Jinjunmai. We've never had it before, not like this one. And 3 new varieties. one of which is very interesting, by the way. It's made of the Wuyishan variety, which is actually an Oolong variety of tea bush, but it's used in the same raw materials to make red tea. Then there's Jinjun Mai from Tongmuguan, of medium grade quality, and so-called Yaocha, wild red tea. So 7 varieties in all. Oh, there's also Yinsung Zhaozhong. It's exceptionally strong and smoky this year, I have to say. I think the aroma has become even more potent, because it's actually last year's harvest. But this is an example of tea that only improves with age. The more fermented the tea, the more fire it has, the better it becomes with age. This is a very illustrative example. The aroma is very strong. Let's see how it tastes. Yes, the taste is strong as well. Exactly how it should be. So now we're going to taste the teas and see which ones we like. Maybe we'll like all of them because these teas have been previously shortlisted from a broader selection. The guys here already know what I like based on my previous orders, based on my tastes. They've shortlisted what I should not hate at least, so we won't waste each other's time. We've already worked with this company, and they've proved that they can make good quality tea. So it's very pleasant to taste tea in such circumstances. The most challenging situation is when you come for the first time, and they begin this all too familiar story. First you waste an hour trying to explain who you are and what you need, then another hour trying to play their games with prices. Then after another hour, they suddenly discover that you actually know a thing or two about tea, and you don't need them to give you any ridiculous tea. It doesn't always happen, but still too often. So in this regard, it's much simpler to work with people you already know. They just have to be decent people, that's essential. So now we have 7 very high quality red teas, which will probably all appear in our collection. We'll update our collection, and some of our favourite items will be back in stock. It's been hours since we arrived at the factory, and the tea pickers keep coming. So there's a very large harvest of fresh tea. Actually, these people own the plantation, so they sell fresh leaves and mauchao, and produce tea as well. But they can't process all the tea they harvest. They have a second factory, it turns out. First time I saw them, they weren't selling the leaves. They were transporting them to another factory. Here they don't have enough capacity for processing such amounts of tea. An owner of another factory in Laoban came here, so they loaded up a truck. The owner was wondering what kind of raw materials they have, and how much. So they weighed their leaves, and now a whole truck of fresh tea is going to his factory. This is a machine for tossing tea leaves, or yaoxing in Chinese. It's one of the most important stages in oolong production, which distinguishes oolong from other types of tea. This kind of yaoxing is only performed for processing oolong tea. This machine is commonly used in Wuyishan. In the majority of factories, they toss tea leaves using such machines. It's the second stage after weidiao, withering, when leaves are left for a while to dry a little. When leaves are being tossed, they also heat them. They use burning coal, and hot air enters and circulates through special fans. It's natural bamboo coal. It says here on the package that it's high-grade bamboo coal. So this high-grade bamboo coal adds a lot of heat to the cylinder of the machine. Then they close it, and the cylinder starts to spin. After tossing, they roast the leaves, and after roasting comes kneading, and eventually the leaves are left to dry. The product that we get after drying is called malcha. Let's see what it looks like. Behind me, there's a drum that's used for drying. It's not being used at the moment, because the first batch of tea is already finished. So now they again begin with Yaoxing, and later they'll proceed with other stages. And this heap here is the first batch of tea. I can only imagine how much fresh tea there was to make this huge heap of semi-finished product. So this is basically how production looks. It's not a very big factory. It mainly produces the semi-finished product, malcha. This is malcha. About 30 to 40% of tea at this stage is stems. After they're done with Hongbei, the heap will become much smaller. They've launched the Yaoxing machines. This is how slowly they spin. First, they heated up the leaves. The machine stayed open for a while. They were saturating the leaves with hot air. There's a little opening, and you can see that a stream of air is coming out of it, so the fans are pretty strong. They keep moving the hot air. The further away from the coal, the cooler the air. Yeah, this part of the cylinder feels warmer, and it gradually cools towards this side. You can see that they're not spinning very fast. They're trying to imitate how they used to toss the leaves by hand in ancient times. You might have seen it in my old videos. They used to use bamboo trays and toss the leaves up and down like this. It took a long time. It's one of the essential and most complicated procedures, and it's very hard to do it by hand. When I climbed on this hill, I realized why manufacturers of this tea call it cliff tea, and how it can be justified. Because here's a cliff, and there's a cliff, and there are a few cliffs over there, and that's where the whole cliff area starts. So we're basically in the middle of a cliff area. There's just no cliffs right here. So technically, it's half cliff Oolong, but essentially by all measures it is cliff Oolong. It's not the top grade category. This tea doesn't grow in a valley between two cliffs, which is an ideal place to grow cliff Oolong. So it's not considered top grade here, because it's not an ideal place. But it's still Wuyishan. It's right next to the cliff territory, unlike what happens sometimes, when tea that's grown 50 kilometers away from Wuyi is still called Wuyishan Oolong by manufacturers. It's not the case here. This tea does indeed grow inside the cliff territory, so tea grown here can be rightfully called cliff Oolong. Enjoy your tea.